This 1887 royal portrait seems elegant until you realize they're all cousins. 15 members of the von Ehrenberg family posed in Victorian splendor at their Hudson River estate, displaying the wealth and nobility they'd brought from Bavaria to America. But when curator Dr. Margaret Holloway examined this donated daguerreotype in 2019, she noticed something disturbing. Several subjects had their hands carefully positioned to hide parts of their faces. 3 teenage boys stood behind a decorative screen, showing only their torsos. The lighting seemed deliberately manipulated to cast shadows across certain features. When she cross-referenced the family genealogy records, the truth became clear. Baron Friedrich had married his first cousin, Wilhelmina. Their son Hermann married his first cousin, Greta. 7 marriages within 3 generations, all between cousins, uncles, and nieces. What appeared to be careful Victorian formality was actually an elaborate concealment of what these bloodlines had produced. Medical records revealed the Habsburg jaw, hemophilia, and bleeding disorders that claimed multiple children before age 20. How many other elegant family portraits are hiding the devastating cost of keeping bloodlines pure? If this story has sparked your interest in the hidden truths of history, consider subscribing to our channel to help keep hidden histories alive, and comment your city and local time. We're interested to know how far these documented accounts travel. On a gray November morning in 2019, Dr. Margaret Holloway pulled on white cotton gloves and carefully lifted the daguerreotype from its archival housing. The Hudson Valley Historical Society had received the donation 3 weeks earlier from the estate of a deceased collector, along with a cardboard box of yellowed documents and a handwritten note claiming the materials belonged to some German nobles who lived up the river. As the Society's senior curator specializing in German-American immigrant families, Holloway had seen hundreds of formal portraits from the 1880s, but this one immediately struck her as unusual. 15 people arranged themselves across the frame in elaborate Victorian dress. The men wore military-style uniforms with gold braiding and ceremonial swords, while the women displayed silk gowns that would have cost more than most families earned in a year. Children stood arranged by height, their clothing equally expensive, their poses rigidly formal. At the center sat an older man with a carefully waxed mustache and penetrating eyes, his hand resting possessively on the shoulder of a woman whose elaborate bustle and jeweled necklace proclaimed aristocratic status. The composition appeared masterful, every detail calculated to project wealth, refinement, and European noble-bearing transplanted to American soil. But as Holloway adjusted her magnifying glass and examined the image more closely, peculiar details began to emerge. Several subjects had positioned their hands in ways that partially obscured their faces, fingers strategically placed near jawlines and mouths. 3 teenage boys stood behind an ornate decorative screen that showed only their torsos and shoulders, their faces completely hidden from view. The photographer had used dramatic lighting that cast deep shadows across certain features, creating an almost theatrical effect that seemed deliberately designed to conceal rather than reveal. Most strangely, the careful positioning that initially appeared to showcase aristocratic elegance began to look more like an elaborate system of concealment. Holloway turned to the accompanying documents, searching for context that might explain the unusual composition. The family genealogy records, written in meticulous German script, identified the subjects as the von Ehrenberg family, German nobility who had established their American estate, called Bergfried, along the Hudson River in 1882. Baron Friedrich von Ehrenberg, the genealogy explained, had married Wilhelmina von Ehrenberg in 1873. Their son, Hermann von Ehrenberg, had married Greta von Ehrenberg in 1891. Multiple marriage entries followed the same pattern, each union carefully documented with dates, locations, and witness signatures. It took several minutes for the pattern to register fully. Holloway cross-referenced names, birth dates, and family relationships, slowly realizing that nearly every marriage listed in the genealogy records involved first cousins, second cousins, or uncle-niece unions. Baron Friedrich had married his first cousin. Hermann had married his first cousin. Between 1883 and 1895, 7 marriages had occurred within the family circle, each union designed to keep the bloodline and the rapidly accumulating American industrial wealth within an ever-tightening genetic pool. The realization transformed her understanding of the portrait entirely. What had appeared to be careful Victorian formality was actually an elaborate concealment of what these bloodlines had produced. The strategically positioned hands weren't aristocratic poses, but attempts to hide facial deformities. The boys behind the decorative screen weren't being artistic, but were concealing physical abnormalities that would have shocked 19th century viewers. The dramatic lighting wasn't creating mood, but was casting shadows to minimize the visibility of genetic disorders that marked multiple family members. Holloway reached for her phone and photographed several pages of the genealogy records before carefully returning the materials to their archival housing. She had spent 25 years researching German-American immigrant families, but she had never encountered such systematic documentation of aristocratic inbreeding in America. The von Ehrenbergs had apparently transported not just their titles and wealth to the New World, but also their obsession with bloodline purity that had characterized European nobility for centuries. Over the following days, she began systematic research into the family's American presence. Marriage records from St. Peter's German Lutheran Church in Rhinecliff confirmed the genealogy's accuracy, showing that the von Ehrenbergs had paid substantial sums to obtain special ecclesiastical dispensations for marriages between close relatives. Court documents revealed the family's rapid accumulation of wealth through strategic investments in Hudson Valley industries, along with their determined efforts to create an insular aristocratic community that would maintain European noble traditions on American soil. The investigation revealed the family's desperate motivation. Unlike in Bavaria, where their noble status was automatically recognized and respected, in America they needed to create and maintain their aristocratic identity through deliberate isolation and careful bloodline control. Cousin marriage wasn't just about maintaining genetic purity, it was about ensuring that their American fortune would never be diluted by marriages to commoners or immigrants from lower social classes. Each carefully arranged union served dual purposes, preserving what they believed to be superior noble blood while consolidating financial power within an increasingly small family circle. But as Holloway would soon discover, the price of this aristocratic perfection had been far higher than the von Ehrenbergs could have imagined, and the elegant portrait had captured not the triumph of noble bloodlines in America, but the beginning of their genetic catastrophe. Dr. Holloway's investigation deepened as she gained access to the Columbia University archives and the extensive German-American collections at the New York Historical Society. The von Ehrenberg name appeared in multiple correspondence collections, revealing a family whose American ambitions extended far beyond simple wealth accumulation. Letters between Baron Friedrich and his brother Wilhelm, who had remained in Bavaria, exposed the deliberate strategy behind their New World aristocratic experiment. In one particularly revealing letter dated March 1884, Friedrich wrote in formal German, "We must maintain the purity of our line in this new land, even more vigilantly than at home. Here, without the ancient structures to protect our blood, we become the guardians of our own nobility." The correspondence revealed that the von Ehrenbergs viewed America as both opportunity and threat. While industrial investments offered unprecedented wealth accumulation, the democratic social structure posed existential danger to their aristocratic identity. Wilhelm's responses from Bavaria expressed concern about bloodline dilution and urged his brother to establish marriage protocols that would preserve our essential nature for future generations. The brothers exchanged detailed genealogical charts, tracking bloodlines with the precision of livestock breeders, identifying suitable marriage partners among distant cousins who had also emigrated to America. Marriage records from St. Peter's German Lutheran Church in Rhinecliff documented the systematic implementation of this strategy. Between 1883 and 1895, 7 marriages occurred within the von Ehrenberg family circle. Each ceremony required special ecclesiastical dispensation due to the close blood relationships involved, and church financial records showed the family paid substantial fees to obtain these religious approvals. Pastor Johannes Brennan's private notes, preserved in the church archives, revealed his growing discomfort with performing these unions. By 1890, he was documenting theological concerns regarding the ethical implications of such close blood marriages, and questioning whether divine law permits such repeated cousin unions within a single family line. Court documents from Dutchess County revealed the family's rapid financial success and their determination to maintain social isolation. The von Ehrenbergs invested heavily in Hudson Valley Railroad construction, textile manufacturing, and river commerce, accumulating wealth at a rate that impressed even established American families. But their business partnerships remained strictly limited to other German immigrant families of noble background, and their social interactions followed equally rigid patterns. Guest lists from estate parties, preserved in household account books, showed the same dozen families appearing repeatedly, creating an insular, aristocratic community that rarely interacted with broader American society. The most damaging evidence emerged from the German hospital of the city of New York, where Dr. Heinrich Müller maintained detailed medical records of his aristocratic patients. Müller had trained at the University of Munich and specialized in treating wealthy German immigrants who preferred physicians who spoke their language and understood their cultural expectations. His official patient files contained standard Victorian medical euphemisms, but his private notes, written in archaic German medical terminology, told a far more disturbing story. Beginning in 1886, Müller's coded records documented what he termed constitutional weaknesses affecting multiple von Ehrenberg family members across generations. He noted familial jaw malformation in several patients, describing pronounced lower jaw protrusion that interferes with proper mastication and clear speech articulation. His medical notes recorded hereditary bleeding disorders affecting young male family members, with detailed observations about prolonged hemorrhaging from minor injuries and internal bleeding episodes requiring extended bed rest and specialized nursing care. Müller's correspondence with medical colleagues in Germany revealed his growing alarm about the patterns he was observing. In a letter to Professor Ernst Weber at the Munich Medical Faculty, dated September 1889, he wrote, "The effects of repeated cousin marriage are manifesting with devastating clarity among my patients. The jaw deformities are becoming more pronounced with each generation, and the bleeding disorders are claiming young lives with increasing frequency." Weber's response, preserved in Müller's files, confirmed similar observations among Bavarian noble families and warned that continued intermarriage within such genetically restricted populations will produce increasingly severe manifestations of these hereditary weaknesses. The financial cost of concealing these medical problems became evident through the family's detailed household account books. By 1890, nearly 30% of the von Ehrenberg fortune was being spent on medical expenses that were carefully disguised in the accounting records. Payments to special nurses appeared monthly, along with substantial fees for discreet medical consultants and mysterious construction costs for renovating the estate's east wing. The account books listed regular payments to private transportation services and custodial care arrangements without specifying the nature of these services, suggesting systematic efforts to hide affected family members from public view. As Holloway pieced together the documentary evidence, a clear picture emerged of a family caught between aristocratic ambition and genetic catastrophe. The von Ehrenbergs had successfully transplanted their noble bloodline to America and accumulated vast wealth through strategic investments, but their obsession with bloodline purity was systematically destroying the very family they sought to preserve. The elegant portrait from 1887 had captured them at the height of their American success, but it had also documented the beginning of their genetic collapse. Dr. Holloway realized that understanding the full scope of the von Ehrenberg tragedy required modern medical expertise to interpret the 19th century evidence she had uncovered. She contacted Dr. James Whitmore, a Johns Hopkins geneticist, who had spent decades studying historical cases of aristocratic inbreeding and its devastating effects on European noble families. When she shared Dr. Muller's coded medical records and the family genealogy charts, Whitmore immediately recognized the classic patterns of what geneticists now call inbreeding depression, the systematic breakdown of genetic health that occurs when closely related individuals reproduce repeatedly within isolated populations. Whitmore's analysis of Dr. Muller's euphemistic medical terminology revealed the true extent of the genetic catastrophe afflicting the von Ehrenberg family. The familial jaw malformation that Muller documented corresponded precisely to what modern medicine recognizes as mandibular prognathism, commonly known as the Habsburg jaw, due to its prevalence among the inbred Habsburg dynasty of Europe. This genetic condition, caused by recessive genes that become dominant through repeated cousin marriage, produces severe lower jaw protrusion that interferes with eating, speaking, and breathing. The constitutional bleeding disorders that Muller observed were almost certainly hemophilia, the hereditary clotting disorder that had famously plagued European royal families for generations. Letters from Baroness Wilhelmina to her sister in Munich, discovered in a private collection of German immigrant correspondence, provided heartbreaking first-hand accounts of watching these genetic disorders destroy her children. Writing in 1891, she described poor dear Herman who cannot chew properly and speaks with such difficulty that strangers often cannot understand his words. Her correspondence revealed the daily reality of caring for genetically compromised children while maintaining the aristocratic facade that defined the family's social identity. She wrote of little Friedrich, who bleeds for hours from the smallest cut, requiring constant vigilance to prevent him from normal childhood activities that might cause injury. The most disturbing evidence emerged from household account books that documented the family's systematic efforts to hide their most severely affected members from public view. Construction records from 1889 showed extensive renovations to the estate's east wing, creating what the architectural plans euphemistically described as private family quarters with specialized medical facilities. These renovations included reinforced doors, barred windows, and a separate entrance that allowed discreet access without passing through the main house. Payment records showed regular fees to specialized nursing staff, who were required to sign confidentiality agreements, an unusual practice for domestic employees of that era. Servant testimonies, preserved in legal depositions from an 1891 boundary dispute with neighboring landowners, provided rare glimpses into the concealed reality of daily life at the von Ehrenberg estate. Bertha Kleiss, the head housekeeper, testified about family members who never came to dinner with the others and lived in special rooms where only the doctor and certain nurses were permitted to visit. Her testimony revealed that some family members required constant supervision due to cognitive disabilities that accompanied their physical deformities, and that the family employed what she described as keepers rather than traditional servants to manage their care. The breakthrough in understanding the full scope of the tragedy came through cemetery records from St. Peter's Churchyard in Rhinecliff. Death certificates revealed that 5 von Ehrenberg children had died between the ages of 8 and 16 from causes listed vaguely as constitutional failure, internal bleeding, or respiratory complications. When Whitmore compared these death records with Dr. Muller's private medical notes, the true causes became clear. 3 children had died from hemophilia-related hemorrhaging following minor injuries, while 2 others had succumbed to complications from severe facial deformities that prevented proper eating and breathing. Church burial records revealed an additional layer of concealment that demonstrated the family's desperate efforts to maintain their public reputation. Several family members who had died in their teens or early 20s were listed in official genealogy records as having died in infancy, effectively erasing their existence from family history. The discrepancy between actual death dates and family genealogy records suggested systematic falsification of family histories to conceal the extent of genetic disabilities and premature deaths. Dr. Muller's private correspondence with medical colleagues revealed his growing horror at the unfolding genetic catastrophe and his own complicity in enabling it. In a letter to his former professor at Munich dated December 1892, he wrote, "I have become witness to the systematic destruction of a noble bloodline through willful ignorance of natural law. Each generation manifests more severe abnormalities. Yet the family continues to arrange marriages between cousins, driven by aristocratic pride that blinds them to the suffering they perpetuate." His medical notes from this period showed increasing reluctance to treat new von Ehrenberg pregnancies, recognizing that each child faced almost certain genetic disability. The financial records revealed that by 1893, managing the family's genetic crisis consumed nearly 40% of their American fortune. Payments to private medical facilities, specialized equipment for disabled family members, and the complex system of servants and nurses required to maintain concealment had transformed their vast wealth into a burden dedicated primarily to hiding the consequences of their bloodline obsession. Dr. Raid Holloway's investigation expanded as she uncovered the sophisticated machinery of concealment that the von Ehrenberg family had constructed to maintain their public image while hiding the genetic catastrophe consuming their bloodline. The key to understanding this system lay in the professional network they employed, beginning with Wilhelm Steinberg, the prominent New York Society photographer whose technical innovations had made large-scale photographic deception possible. Steinberg's detailed business records preserved in the New York Historical Society's photography collection revealed a lucrative specialization in what his invoices euphemistically described as challenging portrait compositions for wealthy families dealing with sensitive presentation requirements. The 1887 von Ehrenberg portrait represented the pinnacle of Steinberg's concealment artistry. His invoices showed multiple photography sessions spanning 3 weeks, with additional payments for specialized positioning consultations and advanced shadow enhancement techniques. His correspondence with Baron Friedrich revealed the calculated nature of their collaboration. In one letter dated August 1887, Steinberg wrote, "The strategic placement of decorative elements will address your specific concerns regarding the younger male subjects, while careful lighting manipulation will minimize the visibility of facial irregularities among the adult family members." The photographer had essentially become a visual architect of deception, using his technical expertise to transform genetic disability into aristocratic elegance. Steinberg's business correspondence with other wealthy German-American families revealed that the von Ehrenbergs were not unique in requiring such specialized services. Letters from the Waldberg family in Connecticut and the Metternich descendants in Pennsylvania discussed similar discrete photographic arrangements for family members with constitutional challenges. This network of aristocratic concealment extended beyond individual families, creating a mutual support system for maintaining the fiction of genetic superiority among German-American nobility. The photographers, physicians, and service providers who enabled this deception formed a professional class that profited from aristocratic shame while maintaining strict confidentiality about their clients' secrets. The most disturbing evidence of systematic concealment emerged from correspondence between Baron Friedrich and the Trenton State Hospital in New Jersey, discovered in the hospital's administrative archives. Beginning in 1889, the von Ehrenbergs had paid substantial fees for what the hospital records described as private custodial care for individuals listed only by initials rather than full names. These payments continued for years, suggesting long-term institutionalization of family members whose genetic disabilities made them unsuitable for life within the aristocratic household. Hospital admission records, cross-referenced with von Ehrenberg genealogy documents, revealed that at least 3 family members who were officially listed as having died in infancy were actually living at Trenton State well into their 20s. Dr. Margaret Chen, a modern psychiatric historian specializing in 19th century institutional care, helped Holloway interpret the Trenton State records. The hospital had operated a discreet wing for wealthy families seeking to hide developmentally disabled relatives, charging premium fees for what they advertised as private residential care with complete confidentiality. The von Ehrenberg payments were among the highest on record, suggesting that their family members required extensive specialized care due to severe cognitive and physical disabilities. Hospital staff notes described patients with pronounced facial deformities accompanied by severe mental deficiency and bleeding disorders requiring constant medical supervision. Financial records revealed the true cost of maintaining this elaborate system of concealment. The von Ehrenberg account books for 1894 showed that medical expenses, institutional payments, specialized photography services, and what accountants labeled discretionary family maintenance consumed nearly 50% of their annual income. The family's American fortune, accumulated through successful industrial investments, had been transformed into a mechanism for hiding the genetic collapse that their bloodline obsession had produced. Each affected child required a complex support network of specialized physicians, institutional care, modified living arrangements, and carefully orchestrated public absence explanations. Correspondence between Baron Friedrich and other German-American noble families revealed a broader network of mutual concealment that extended across multiple states. Letters discovered in the Bavarian American Cultural Society archives showed detailed discussions about reliable physicians who would not document certain conditions in official medical records, sharing information about discrete institutional arrangements for affected family members, and even coordinating marriages between families with similar constitutional challenges to minimize the risk of producing children whose disabilities could not be concealed. The most chilling aspect of this concealment machinery was its systematic nature. The von Ehrenbergs had not stumbled into hiding their genetic problems, but had deliberately constructed an elaborate infrastructure for deception before the worst effects of inbreeding became apparent. Baron Friedrich's correspondence from 1885, 2 years before the family portrait was taken, already discussed contingency plans for managing potential bloodline complications and establishing appropriate care arrangements for family members who might not meet social expectations. This premeditated approach to concealment suggested that they understood the risks of their marriage practices, but chose to proceed while building systems to hide the consequences. The network of professionals who enabled this concealment extended beyond individual service providers to include legal advisors, financial managers, and social coordinators who helped maintain the fiction of aristocratic perfection. Estate lawyers drafted confidentiality agreements for servants, financial advisors, created accounting categories that disguised medical expenses, and social secretaries managed public appearance schedules that carefully excluded affected family members from community events. This professional conspiracy of silence allowed the von Ehrenbergs to maintain their position in German-American high society while systematically hiding the human cost of their genetic experiment. The complete picture of the von Ehrenberg tragedy emerged as Dr. Holloway triangulated medical records, financial documents, and genealogical evidence to reveal the devastating human cost of aristocratic bloodline obsession. Of the 15 family members captured in the elegant 1887 portrait, only 6 would survive past the age of 35. The 3 teenage boys hidden behind the decorative screen all suffered from severe Habsburg jaw deformities that made eating and speaking increasingly difficult as they matured. 2 of them, Friedrich and Wilhelm, died from hemophilia-related bleeding before reaching their 20th birthdays, their deaths occurring after minor injuries that would have been insignificant for individuals with normal blood clotting abilities. The carefully positioned hands that had initially appeared to showcase aristocratic refinement were actually concealing missing fingers and severe scarring from repeated bleeding episodes that had required amputation to save the affected individuals' lives. Dr. Muller's private medical notes documented these procedures in clinical detail, describing necessary digit removal due to uncontrolled hemorrhaging following minor trauma and progressive tissue necrosis requiring surgical intervention. The dramatic lighting that photographer Wilhelm Steinberg had used to create an atmosphere of noble dignity was actually casting shadows to minimize the visibility of facial deformities that had become increasingly pronounced with each generation of cousin marriage. Hermann von Ehrenberg, Baron Friedrich's eldest son and designated heir, represented the family's most tragic figure. Born with moderate Habsburg jaw deformity that affected his speech and eating, he possessed keen intelligence and growing awareness that the family's marriage practices were systematically destroying his relatives. His private correspondence with university friends, discovered in the Columbia University archives, revealed a young man torn between aristocratic duty and mounting horror at watching younger cousins suffer increasingly severe genetic effects. In one particularly poignant letter dated March 1893, he wrote, "I am compelled to perpetuate the very bloodline that has cursed my speech and may curse my children, yet I lack the courage to break from traditions that define our family's identity and wealth." Hermann's marriage to his first cousin Greta in 1891 had been arranged specifically to concentrate the family's American fortune and maintain bloodline purity, but their 2 children died in infancy from bleeding disorders so severe that they could not survive minor birth trauma. Hospital records from the German Hospital of New York documented these deaths as complications from hereditary hemorrhagic diathesis, medical terminology that disguised the reality that these infants had bled to death from genetic disorders that made normal blood clotting impossible. Hermann himself died in 1895 at age 25 from internal bleeding following what his death certificate euphemistically described as constitutional failure, leaving behind detailed journals that chronicled his awareness of the family's genetic catastrophe and his powerlessness to prevent it. The family line effectively ended with Friedrich von Ehrenberg III, Hermann's younger brother who survived until 1912, but remained unmarried due to cognitive disabilities and physical deformities so severe that even the elaborate concealment machinery his family had constructed could not disguise his condition sufficiently for public appearances. Hospital records from his final years described progressive deterioration of mental faculties, accompanied by severe bleeding episodes requiring constant medical supervision. He died childless at age 28, and with his death the American branch of the von Ehrenberg nobility ceased to exist. The Rhinecliff estate, which had once symbolized the successful transplantation of European aristocracy to American soil, was sold in 1913 to pay accumulated debts that had grown to overwhelming proportions. Estate liquidation records revealed that the family's vast fortune, accumulated through strategic industrial investments during the 1880s and 1890s, had been almost entirely consumed by medical expenses, institutional care costs, and the elaborate concealment systems required to maintain their public reputation while hiding their genetic collapse. Modern DNA analysis, conducted by Dr. Whitmore with permission from Margaret von Ehrenberg-Chen, a descendant of Baron Friedrich's brother who had remained in Bavaria and married outside the family bloodline, confirmed the genetic bottleneck that had destroyed the American von Ehrenbergs. The coefficient of inbreeding within the family had reached levels comparable to laboratory-bred research animals, virtually guaranteeing the expression of recessive genetic disorders that would normally remain hidden in diverse populations. Chen's own genetic testing showed no trace of the Habsburg jaw or hemophilia genes, demonstrating how genetic diversity had protected her branch of the family from the catastrophe that consumed their American cousins. The discovery led to significant changes in how the Hudson Valley Historical Society presents 19th-century German immigrant nobility in their exhibitions. The von Ehrenberg portrait now serves as a centerpiece for educational programs about genetic diversity, the dangers of social isolation, and the human cost of maintaining artificial hierarchies based on bloodline purity. Visitors learn not just about the elegant lifestyle that German aristocrats created in America, but also about the systematic concealment of suffering that maintaining such lifestyles required when genetic diversity was sacrificed for social status. Most significantly, the von Ehrenberg story connects to contemporary understanding of genetic health and social inclusion. Their tragedy serves as a historical warning about the consequences of ideologies that prioritize genetic or cultural purity over human welfare, offering lessons relevant to modern discussions about diversity, genetic counseling, and the dangers of isolated communities that restrict marriage partners based on ancestry, religion, or social status. The portrait remains on permanent display at the Hudson Valley Historical Society, but now with complete documentation of what the elegant poses concealed. A family's desperate attempt to maintain aristocratic prestige while their obsession with bloodline purity systematically destroyed the very people they claimed to be protecting, leaving behind only a haunting photograph and a cautionary tale about the price of genetic isolation.